Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Simon and today I'm back not with the forementioned or formerly advertised video of Mum and I talking about James by Percival Everett as the penultimate of our parallel reads for the Booker Prize. I've got two apologies to make, and the first is that I haven't got round to reading this yet. As you may have guessed from my previous video, and you may be able to tell from this video, I've had a bit of a rotten, stinking old time of it since I had my booster jabs, and so yeah, I have partly just not wanted to film really, but also I've had loads of work reading to do, as next week I will be interviewing not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, but 7 authors in the space of 1 week, and so I've had quite the reading to do before that. However, I'm going to have some time over this weekend. I have no plans because I've actually cancelled some plans this evening because I'm still feeling a bit bleh, which is very unlike me because I do love an evening out. Not too often, obviously, but occasionally. I'm planning on reading this over the next couple of days and then that video will go live. Mum has already filmed her segments. I have not watched them. I'm just aware that they're on my WhatsApp waiting to be downloaded, so apologies for that. And then the second apology is this stinking lighting. We've hit that time of year. I love autumn, but we have hit that time of year where sometimes the old fake lighting's got to go out, and mine's broken, so it's at an angle that means it doesn't quite light up everything as much as it should. So I need to sort out ordering some more lighting. Anyway, and I would put that on because it would feel so much more welcoming than that starkness. However, the glare would be too much, and then you wouldn't be able to see the 10 books. Perfect segue. Oh my god, it's quite heavy. So I just dropped all of those books, and I've decided not to keep that footage in because it would be quite horrifying for many of you, and Halloween was yesterday. And yeah, I don't think you deserve that footage. Also, just my effing and jeffing and swearing, frankly, was quite high. Also, I had to have a word to myself because when did I suddenly start talking about lighting so much? Is this the IKEA channel? No, it is not. Although that is bugging me that it isn't like a warmer light, and I don't know, it feels like it's not welcoming. Moving on though to the books that I was going to tell you about, or am going to tell you about, as today is the 1st of November, and a happy new month to all of you who celebrate a new month as much as I do. I think sometimes I possibly put a little bit too much of a, is it an onus? Is that the word I want to use? It sounds slightly rude, so it feels a little bit wrong, but a little bit right. I think I put too much of an onus on the start of the new month. It's the 1st of November, and that means that it is non-fiction November, and I thought I would have a chat with you about 10 books that I have on my, I don't really want to call it a TBR, because as soon as I label something a TBR, being an utter contrary Mary, I fight against reading it. So I'm going to call this my potential periphery for non-fiction November. Oh, I like that, the potential periphery. I can't say it, but I like it. I'm not going to use that in the thumbnail though, because TBR is much more clickable. So let's get cracking and finally talk about these 10 books that I've been hinting at for quite some time. Now, the first of the books that I picked is one that I'm definitely going to read, and very imminently, because it is my pick for my Patreon book club, and it is Leg by Greg Marshall, which is the story of a limb and the boy who grew from it. So this is a book I've been aware of for a little while, but it wasn't until I saw Drop City Books in Stoke-on-Trent had done it for their book club, and apparently it's quite naughty, and that I thought, ooh, is the perfect read for Patreon book club. It is about Greg's life as a queer man growing up, coming to terms with both his sexuality and his disability, and I'm really looking forward to it. I am really intrigued as to how the conversation is going to be around it, and if you'd like to join in, we'll be talking about it on Wednesday at 7 p.m. GMT on Zoom, and if you're part of Patreon you get a Zoom link sent to you, and we have a lovely time. So yeah, I think this is going to be one that creates some interesting discussion. I am really keen to get to Neneh Cherry's memoir, 1,000 Threads, and I have been a fan of Neneh Cherry for years. I remember my aunties used to dance to Buffalo Stance when I was a kid. Then there was 7 Seconds, which I remember just playing on repeat obsessively for years. And the album Woman, I just think is amazing. And yeah, I think she is a force for good. And I'm really intrigued to hear her story about her time in the industry, what it was like to be a black woman coming up in the industry. Also, Andy Oliver, who I adore, is one of Neneh's friends and has said that this is absolutely amazing. And so, yeah, I'm really keen to get to this one and hoping to in November. Possibly one of the books that I've been most excited about this year that's also a non-fiction book. I made it sound like they should be exclusive to each other, but I do feel like my relationship with non-fiction has really changed. I didn't love it when I was... Actually, that's not true. I really loved non-fiction when I can remember first going to the library. Although it won't have been when I first went, it'll just been at some point in my sort of childhood where the memories are there. But I used to go and obsessively head to the non-fiction section because I was fascinated in like the supernatural, particularly spontaneous human combustion and the Bermuda Triangle. So I don't know what that was about, but yeah, they were kind of two things that really fascinated me. And non-fiction books were great, but then I think school made me feel like it was always quite academic, and that alienated me. I didn't do pass my GCSEs at school. I just not a very academic person. But then after my break of not reading between like 16 and then in my early 20s, it was fiction that drew me in. And it wasn't until I think my late 20s, early 30s, I started to read narrative non-fiction occasionally, and there'll be like some big hitters for me. And maybe at some point, if you'd like me to do a video of my favourite non-fiction books, I will, although I am thinking about doing that as a reel maybe on Instagram, possibly. Gotta keep down with the books to kids. So yeah, I sort of fell out of love with it, and then slowly started picking it back up, literally. And it was, I think, about 2017 that I got kind of much more into it, and then 2018, 2019 even more. And then because of the old pandemonium that arrived in 2020, and the amount of news that I was ingesting and how reality just seemed a bit too much, I didn't want to read about the real world. I wanted to escape into fiction, which I know can be about the real world, but you know what I mean? So yeah, I'd like to basically, that was a long way of me saying I'd really like to get back into non-fiction. And what I want to do is head to a lot of stories that either I feel like will chime with me or are going to take me to experiences that I can't even imagine, or places or people's lives. And I'm definitely much more interested. I know I've just shown Neneh Cherry's memoir, but like I want to hear real stories about real people. And this seems, what a long way to get around to talking about the third of the 10 books that I want to tell you about. But this is a book that just the premise sounds so interesting. It's The Observable Universe by Heather McAllen, and it's an investigation, it says. I think it's got two different strands to it, and the first is about Heather losing both of her parents to AIDS. And then also, I believe it looks at Heather's interest in space and kind of then intertwines the two somehow. I just think this sounds like it's going to be absolutely incredible. And yeah, I feel like this is one that I'm going to get to very early in November. Then we have another book that was the imported edition, I should say. The UK edition is from Fitzcarraldo, and so is just the white with the blue text, I think. I've really loved the books Fitzcarraldo publish, but I do find the blue or white and blue a little bit boring, and that cover is so gorgeous. I couldn't not get it from further afield. But another book that I got imported over, I don't know if this is going to be published in the UK or not, is Another Word for Love by Carvell Wallace. And this is something that I saw people raving about earlier this year in America. This is Carvell's memoir about growing up as a queer black boy and man in America. It's very complex, and I think it's going to be interesting, possibly quite heartbreaking, to hear from Carvell about his experiences. I have just heard amazing things about this. Yeah, I think it also looks at masculinity as well, which I also find really interesting, because again, there can be this thing within the queer community around like masculinity being really attractive, but also toxic masculinity being really quite terrifying. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting book. Then a book that I was sent unsolicited earlier this year, but just sounds just my thing. This is The Museum of Lost and Fragile Things, A Year of Salvage by Suzanne Joinson. And this is Suzanne writing about her life, where she grew up in kind of, I don't want to say a cult, but it does kind of, cult is mentioned on the back, but she grew up in a cult in a very working class background, and through items of nostalgia that I think she finds and salvages, well, would be suggested from Jen. I haven't read it yet, so therefore I feel like I can be excused for not knowing exactly what it's about. Through salvaging various items that bring real nostalgia and memories to her, she tells us the story of growing up in that situation. So I think this is going to be really, really interesting too. Then we have a book that I thought, and I mentioned this when I ordered it, I thought this was a novel, and I thought it sounded so interesting because it was about women who abandon their children and how they are deemed by society, and maybe the reasons for why those women did it. I didn't realise it actually is non-fiction about quite famous women who've done this. It's The Abandoners by Begona Gomez Urzaiz, translated by Lizzie Davis from, I think, the Spanish, I want to say. It doesn't tell me. I wish they'd tell you which it was translated from. I mean, I'm glad that the translator is on the cover. The subtitle for this is Of Mothers and Monsters, and I think it does look at the perception people have of women who decide to abandon their children for whatever reason. And yeah, quite a creepy cover as well, so it feels sort of right to be reading this around this time of year. There's another book in, well, not the next one, but the one, in fact, no, we'll go to the other book that I feel is, in fact, there's a couple of books that I feel are perfect for this time of year. And the next one of those is Sociopath by Patric Gagne. And I've heard mixed things about this. This is Patric's memoir about, well, it does what it says on the tin, being a sociopath, being diagnosed as a sociopath, and what that has meant. I think it looks at relationships that Patric has had in her life, and the biggest criticism that I've heard about this book is that you feel like you're manipulated by the author. But for me, that's kind of what draws me in, and I find kind of is to be expected and maybe part and parcel of a book like this, because it's a book written by someone who's been diagnosed as a sociopath, writing about what it is to be a sociopath. So I do feel there would be sort of naturally, subconsciously or consciously, manipulation going on. So I'm really, really intrigued for it for that reason. And also I think because of that vibe, it gives that sort of autumnal, Dark Nights are drawing in kind of feel with it too. Don't know, we'll see. I'm hoping to get to this one because it's one that I've been most keen for this year. And on that autumnal sort of, I don't want to use the word vibe, I really, really don't, but I'm probably going to have to. On that autumnal sort of non-fiction vibe, for me, autumn is about curling up with a big historical chunkster. And in terms of non-fiction, particularly this year, from the books that I've seen come out, you can't get bigger and chunkier and more historical, well, I mean, you can go further back in history, but you know what I mean, than The Scapegoat by Lucy Hughes-Hallett, which is about the Duke of Buckinghamshire. It's the brilliant and brief life of the Duke of Buckinghamshire. This is about George Villiers, who, if you saw the TV show Mary and George earlier this year, which was absolutely phenomenal, was the lover and advisor to James I. And this takes you deep into the court of that time, into his childhood, how he came to know James. I'm also hoping there's going to be quite a bit about Mary in here, because she was quite the character and portrayed amazingly by Julianne Moore, who I just think is one of like our best living actresses. I think she's phenomenal. So yeah, I'm really, really keen to get to this at some point. Thankfully, I have a proof that I can sort of cart around. Oh, there's pictures and all sorts. I'm very excited. Yes, I'm getting quite excited about this one. And it's interesting that these sort of appealed to me, these books, so much, I say that, I've got quite a few on the shelves behind me, my non-fiction is all here, and I still haven't headed to Bess of Hardwick, who is like one of my she's one of my historical icons. I think she's amazing. Hardwick Hall is my favourite stately home of them all. But the idea of these draw me to them so much because I do really love a good historical novel, and particularly that sort of into Tudors, post-Tudors, I find really, really fascinating. It's one of my favourite periods of history. I mean, Tudor times are my favourite, then Victorian times are my second favourite, but that sort of period before and after the Tudors, probably my third. And then seeing if we're going on my top 5 historical periods, I would say at number 4, we're rocking the interwar years, although I don't really like reading about World War I or World War II. Read them too much when I was younger. Well, not read them too much, but studied them too much, and therefore read about them too much when I was younger, and that puts me right off. Maybe I've just got to the riddle of why I went off historical. No, not historical. What's wrong with you, Simon? You need more Lemsip. I think I've got to the riddle of why or the root of the riddle. I think I've got to the root of the riddle of why I went off non-fiction, because I got bored of reading the same time period so much at school. School can sometimes have quite a lot to answer for. Like, it is school that put me off reading full stop for quite a long period of time, because we were reading the same bits over and over and studying them to death and not just enjoying the books. Moving on. This isn't a tirade about my time being taught at school. This is about books that I'm excited for non-fiction November, and The Scapegoat is one of them. Penultimately, we have a book that I've been really keen to read since I had the pleasure of meeting the author at a publisher breakfast that Bloomsbury held, and one of the authors was Yuan, and this is Private Revolution's Coming of Age in a New China, and this sounds so fascinating. It's a, how do I put this, because it's not a story. This is Yuan Yang writing about the lives of 4 particular women who come from all different parts of China and who have been born in different decades, and how the huge vast change that has swept over China in the last 40 years has affected them in various different ways, in various different parts of China, in various different parts of society within China. That to me just sounds like really fascinating, and one of the things that I do love with non-fiction is learning more through great narratives, which is what I'm hoping this will be. Not to put too much pressure on it, obviously, but I do find narrative non-fiction so compelling, and you learn stuff without feeling like you're being taught stuff, and that kind of links back into why I'm excited for this, because I feel like I'm going to learn loads without being taught it, and actually being taught too much and overanalyzing stuff was what I didn't like at school, and is why I'm not an academic. Anyway, so yeah, this is one that I'm super duper excited for, as I am my last choice, which is certainly not my least of the choices, because actually I think this is one that's going to be the most fun and possibly the most me. Not because I'm a mermaid, a gay mermaid, a queer mermaid actually, if we're going from the cover, because this is Queer as Folklore by Sacha, and this is the hidden queer history of myths and monsters, and that sounds like it's going to be absolute savage catnip, and does link back to what I was saying. I really, really enjoyed those many, many decades. I mean, we're almost heading for 4 of them now, which is terrifying. But when I first started to get books out of the non-fiction section at the library around things like the Bermuda Triangle, spontaneous human combustion, I mean, that's not really myths and monsters, that's more supernatural, but they're on the same kind of, you know, thing. Would they be in the same part on the Dewey Decimal System? Let's not actually have that thought now. That could gear me off into far too many tangents and show my lack of knowledge of the Dewey Decimal System, which, considering I part-time work in the library sector, I feel like I should be way more knowledgeable about than I am. Anyway, yeah, that was a major tangent and took away from the fact that I'm super duper excited for this. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. In fact, I think it's going to be fabulous fun. I'm loving some of the titles of the sections already. I just saw Queerly Departed. Really looking forward to this, and plan on hopefully heading to it very soon. So there we go. Those are 10 books that I would like to potentially, well, they're my, because I was going to say potentially read and therefore be a TBR in November. However, let's rephrase that. They are 10 books that are on my potential periphery for non-fiction November. I would love to know in the comments down below any books that you have on your periphery as potentials for non-fiction November. I would love to know your thoughts on any of these if you've read them and loved them. If you haven't loved them and you have read them, or if you've read them and you haven't loved them, then don't tell me about that right now. Let's wait until I've read them, whenever that may be, hopefully this month. Who can say? I do find it interesting when people have very polar opposites about books, just as I really love it when people have the same thoughts on books. Anyway, that all sounded super duper obvious and a little bit daft now, frankly, so I'm going to go this. Honestly, that is so bothering me that I haven't got that switched on. That feels like a dark, unwelcoming corner now that I'm not holding up books anymore. So I'll just hold them all up again. I'm not going to be able to do this on mine, and I'm going to drop them, and I'll be really, really sad. Yeah, let's stop. So that's all from me. I'd love to know what is, I think I've said this already, but on your periphery for non-fiction November. I'd also love to know what your favourite non-fiction books are and why I might therefore like them too. And if you'd like me to do a video at some point during this month on my favourite non-fiction books, I'm more than happy to do that. Although, like I said, I may end up doing that as a reel. But then with a reel, you don't go into the detail, do you? It's just a quick snapshot and a quick tease. Whereas we can go a little bit more in depth. I made that sound, therefore, like Bookstagram is foreplay for this channel. And I didn't mean it to. And now that I've said it and you've heard it, neither of us can unthink it. Let's go now, because this just got weird. So I hope you're all having a lovely Friday, the 1st of November, or indeed the first weekend of November. Whenever it is you're watching this, I hope you're having a lovely time. And yeah, let's chat favourite non-fiction books in the comments down below of yours. And I may share mine at some point here, there, or anywhere. Who knows? Yeah. Never know how to end a video, which is ridiculous because I've been doing this quite a long time now. But I hope you're all doing something lovely. Or no, because that puts too much pressure on you. I hope you're having as lovely a time as can be. I hope you're reading something that you're loving or enjoying. And if you're not, move on. Pick up something else. And I will see you in another video very, very soon. Bye.